Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here. Hopefully, I think some more people will be joining us as we go along here. Um, Thank you for everyone who's joined us on this call here this morning or this afternoon, rather, wherever you're at. It's morning or afternoon. And to those of you who are going to be watching this after the fact, the recording of it, thank you for taking time as well to watch this and to try to educate ourselves of how we're using AI in local government. So just a reminder for us too, special thank you to our bronze sponsor, especially Clerk Minutes, for their support and the support of this meetings and things like that. So thank you to Malay and the team over there at Clerk Minutes. What I wanted to do and something I was thinking of is so September marks kind of the 2-year anniversary of the launch of ChatGPT. September of 2022 is kind of when it first came out. It really didn't gain popularity until about Christmas time, December. And obviously now it's very much a widely used and or at least widely known platform within our tool set, both in the public sector and the private sector, personally used, professionally used, a lot of different applications. It's kind of become the, like a better term, the Kleenex or the name brand of generative AI models. So on this anniversary of ChatGPT, I thought we'd take some time. Normally we have like someone come on and showcase what they're using in local government or things like that. I want to kind of created a kind of open-ended process for anyone to share where they're at within using generative AI in their local government or within their public agency, how they're deploying it, some of the hurdles they might have come across in the last 2 years, and just kind of share where we are all at and how we're using these different tools and different systems that are out there, lessons learned, challenges we didn't think of 2 years ago, challenges we didn't think of a year ago and last month, and how we're tackling those different challenges. So if you're on the call, and I see a couple people on the call here right now, if you want to unmute yourself, feel free to do that. And would love to hear from you all. How are you using generative AI? What are you guys doing with it right now? And then maybe some of the obstacles or what's a challenge that you're currently facing. So I'm going to stop my screen share here. Does anyone want to raise their hand and just volunteer to kind of speak to how they're using generative AI or any of the challenges that you and your organization are currently facing?
I can speak to kind of where we are, Micah. Thanks for.
Raphael, I can't hear you at all.
I hear him, Micah.
Can you hear me now, Micah?
Still
Yes.
nothing. Let me check something here.
We can hear him.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, everybody else can hear you. Must be on my end here. Go ahead and share, Raphael, and I'll try to fix my audio issues on my side over here. But go ahead.
So for us, kind of where we are, challenge-wise, is we did an approach where we locked down AI tools, and then once the employees go through a 30-minute training with our IT security team, we let them back in. And we're currently working with Microsoft to transition everyone into Microsoft Copilot. So we've done focus groups with all our folks, and we're about to create a community of practice internally and start doing some training sessions to prepare employees for that shift. But the anticipation from IT, at least from our IT security folks, is once we make the move to Copilot, we'll shut down all other AI tools in-house. We've had couple of security issues with some employees not using best practice with AI. Then another challenge we're dealing with right now that's new to us is we're starting to have external people join our meetings with AI bots
Oh,
to record, namely our appointed boards and commissions. We have board members who are skipping the meetings, but sending their AI bot instead to take notes. Generally not an issue, right, for a public meeting, but we've had a couple situations where external folks have brought AI bots to confidential meetings, and we're trying to work through figuring out how to handle that. Apparently, we've had a couple issues with that. So that's a new challenge that we are dealing with.
Yeah. Raphael, can you speak to, so what are some of the security challenges that you'll noticed within staff or things like that? What kind of things did you see, and what were some of your either mitigation strategies or any insight on that kind of thing?
In some of our health focused roles, we had employees putting sensitive health information, so patient information into ChatGPT, putting in patient information to produce. I'm not fully sure what they were doing. We've had folks in law enforcement put in confidential security information. We had an employee in our HR department put in employee relations information in the system to try to produce paperwork and all that. So in the case of HR and the law enforcement folks, we worked with them and just did some training. With our public health folks, we've not let them use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
We're currently, our IT security team is actually working with our electronic health record provider who does have some AI tools built in. We're trying to understand how to activate some of those tools so we can do that within the secure environment that is our electronic health record. That's our big focus is, can we have employees use AI within existing secure environments in which the vendor takes on a lot of the legal liability for data breaches?
Gotcha. And you might have mentioned this while I was trying to get my audio set up here, but I think you briefly mentioned something about using Copilot alone or something like that, right? What have you
Yeah.
seen in terms of why Copilot is a an option when it comes to these different concerns about data security or things like that? Can you speak to kind of what you research you've come across to identify Copilot as a solution of choice for your county?
Yeah, our IT security officer could probably answer that better because he's the one pushing it. And ultimately he controls the firewall, so he gets a lot of power in that decision. But kind of where it comes from is our IT security team has been given early access to test out what the Copilot, the full Monty will look like. They've been pretty impressed. And I think for them, what they really like is the fact that much like they have the ability to have a lot of control over what happens in email and in Teams and different parts of the Microsoft ecosystem, they get that within the Copilot system. So that's for them is they like it's solely control. They like the control of it, right? We did testing, teams, the team and the pro and the enterprise of ChatGPT, and just with the number of employees we have, we found billing to be difficult, control to be difficult. It wasn't seamless. Whereas the hope is Copilot will as a Microsoft client.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So
Anyone have any questions or anybody seen similar things with what Raphael is seeing there in North Carolina? Any similarities? Any questions for Raphael at all? Don't see anything. That's fascinating. Oh, looks like Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, we had very similar instances here in the city of Dallas as well, where we would have a bot taking notes in meetings and that sort of thing. So our IT team sent out, specifically our security team sent out notices to stop using AI until we can get some guidance in place. So we've been working with the San Jose Coalition to kind of just learn and work on templates for policies and that sort of thing. And once we get that in place, then we're going to start rolling out quite a bit of AI tools.
Any similarities in terms of the security side that Raphael was speaking to from your experience in Dallas?
In regard to Copilot or just in general
Just in
security?
general, any types of like staff putting in information they shouldn't have or things like that?
Yeah, there's been a couple things, and I like Raphael's idea of the lock it down until you do the 30-minute training. That's a good one. We've just kind of been taking a step back and to started doing like citywide training on AI and how to use it prudently, I guess you can say, safely.
Yeah. And Sarah and Raphael, when you talk about having AI bots join your meetings, are these AI bots from, say, city staff or city county council members, or are these from the general public that you're seeing people join with these bots?
I think we've had both. I don't know.
Okay.
Raphael, we've had some.
Our firewall prevents our employees from using the bots, so it's been external folks. I don't think there's a single salesperson who hasn't joined with a bot, and we normally don't really care if the salesperson joins with a bot, but it's our advisory board members love it. And then we'll have activists or community members join calls with the bots as well to try to capture everything we say. So it's, again, if it's in a public meeting, we don't really care. But the other issues, a lot of times people don't announce it or don't share. And our stance at least is if it's not a public meeting, you should probably at least have the courtesy of telling folks you're recording it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, because I'm thinking of, okay, what about when maybe members of the media join and want to use a bot to record the meeting or to summarize notes or things like that? Have you had any instances, Sarah, with media trying to use an AI bot to summarize meeting notes or things like that? Or Raphael, anything on that kind of line of things? Or
Not to my knowledge, no.
okay.
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge. I feel like they just record the meeting. We record all our public meetings and put them online anyway. So there's not really a need for the media to do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because the ability to summarize the meeting, right? You can record the meeting, but you also can do the live summary in near real time. Where I wonder if this would be a challenge for cities to have to deal with external AI summarizers joining meetings or things like that, especially from from media or your local media to be able to track what's going on, or that way they can get their story out as soon as possible, even before a meeting. Basically, as soon as the meeting the agenda item is approved or denied, they can have a story out there in seconds afterwards. It could be create quite the challenge, and trying to stay ahead of that is no longer, if you have a meeting that goes till the evening hours, normally you have like that night hour, the overnight, to kind of prepare yourself and get ready for any type of local media response or things like that. But that's gonna be that time window is gonna be shortened over the foreseeable future as folks figure out how to use these different tools. Yeah.
I can imagine that being something that would happen, and not even for this issue of, shortening the time period to immediately or 1 hour. I work for the County Commissioners Association. We support all 100 counties, and I'll occasionally need to find out something that happened in a board meeting and go to the county website, and they're 18 months behind on posting the minutes. That's not uncommon in our smaller counties. Raphael's in one of our larger, more sophisticated counties, but we have a lot that, or maybe have a very rudimentary website because their board doesn't even allow them to have an internal IT department. So I can definitely imagine that it could serve a need that board clerks aren't meeting right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's that could be one of the ways to use it in a positive direction, right? Like any tool, you can see how these things can be used nefariously. You can see how they can be used inappropriately, where through lack of training or lack of accountability, staff puts information they shouldn't be putting in, and also how it can be used in a positive way too, which is why these tools are so complicated to try to manage. Denise, if you don't mind, I'd be curious if you can speak to, you see 100 counties across North Carolina. You see everything from, I'm sure the Research Triangle areas can be a little more sophisticated to some of the ones that are rural. What are you seeing in terms of the landscape of how generative AI is being rolled out across North Carolina counties and the different challenges that you're seeing within that?
I can speak to it a little bit. It's probably true that Raphael has a better sense of what's happening across North Carolina. I've seen him definitely present at our local conferences on it. But I have been surprised to see that I'll say two things. One is it's not necessarily just what we think of as our most sophisticated counties that are necessarily using it. There's one county in sort of southwest or maybe just southern North Carolina that I think of as being very conscious of this meeting being reported, being less advanced than some of the other counties technologically, where the county manager has been gung-ho on board for at least 18 months on generative AI and how it can benefit the county. And then the flip side is we definitely have counties that are struggling to keep the lights on. Maybe don't have a county manager, maybe don't have a finance officer, maybe don't have both right now. And the thought of digging into new technology when they're struggling to get payroll run is not even, it hasn't even hit. So it really has been all across the board. And it's a little bit unfortunate because probably these counties that are struggling the most could benefit the most.
Sure.
But maybe don't have the capacity. I mean, we have a county with about 3,500 residents. So that's
pretty small, yeah.
Pretty small.
Yeah.
Kind of all across the board.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anyone else want to speak to any of the challenges that you're currently seeing across the AI landscape as you and your city and your organization looks to deploy generative AI, or looking at this? Maybe you're even, it doesn't matter where you're at within the journey. Anyone else want to speak to some of the challenges you've come across for the last 2 years since ChatGPT was launched?
I'm not seeing much adoption within my organization. And of course, we're technically not a local government. We only have about 60 employees, but it does seem that people are really held back by their concerns of the AI hallucinating and almost not willing to use it for that reason. So I just recently had a work experience where we had what was going to be a very manual spreadsheet task. And I said, an LLM can definitely do this for you, and showed this person how it might happen in the spreadsheet. But then I cautioned, you're going to need to check it. They do hallucinate. There are errors. And then too skittish, didn't want to do it that way and did it in sort of a longer, more tedious way. And we can do that. We can make it work. But again, thinking about our local governments that can't hire enough staff, we need to find a way to address that concern and have people not be too scared to use it. So that's one thing I have found, like a concern out of some people not wanting to use it at all for that reason.
Yeah, just a fear of what could happen. Yeah. Yeah. Bill, I see you went off mute. Did you want to add anything at all, or share anything from what you're seeing there in Sealy?
Yeah, one thing came up just last week. A policy came out about AI, and I was just curious about others, what you're seeing as far as the use of AI for research, doing your agenda cover memos, things like that. One of the things that they had us, or that put in there, was that any documentation or any use of AI has to be footnoted and sourced. And then also they were talking about the fear of open records requests and being able to put aside those searches and things like that for open records requests. So I was just curious, like I said, it's brand new in our organization as far as the policy. Does that sound familiar, or what does that sound like compared to what you've been seeing?
That's a great question. Anybody want to jump in and share their experiences and what they've seen with that?
We tried writing a policy and it failed, so we decided not to do a policy. In all seriousness, we wrote a policy, and then every time we would go for like the next round of approvals, there'd be a change in technology and something new would pop up. We could never anticipate everything. We could never address everyone's concerns. So we'd said, you know what, just follow our acceptable usage policy. Be smart. And IT security has the authority to remove anyone's access if they feel like you're not being smart. So that's kind of where we land. We just could not get to a place where we felt like then we're like, we don't have an email policy. we don't have a text message policy. We don't have a whatever software policies. Why do we have to have an AI policy?
I think it's a great point. And even too, if you think about the public records request type of things, or your searches or things like that, or the research side of things, um, I don't, to me, I don't think it's any much different than using a Google search engine, right? Are you saving your Google searches to see whether or not they, and then fulfilling records requests based on Google searches, or saving that? I mean, I haven't seen that before. Maybe some cities do that. I've not come across one that does. And you just think of the amount of data just on Google searches alone, right? If you have an organization of any size of more than 10 people in your organization, trying to keep Google searches for the statute of limitations, which is normally about 3 to 5 years, depending where you're at. That would be a massive amount of data to try to store, and the cost of storing that data would be just really, really difficult.
And Micah, that was one of the first things I asked or thought of was, do I now, because I'm using an alternate system such as the internet to get information out of the ethersphere, or however you want to call it, do I have to start citing that, and where does it stop? Because everything we do now is getting information from somewhere else and then utilizing it. So where is the stop point with that?
It also just doesn't even sound like an enforceable policy. And for
Right.
example, occasionally I won't be able to think of a word I'm thinking for, and I ask ChatGPT, what is that word? And it starts with an S and it means this, and then it comes up with the word I can't pull out of the air. I mean, I'm going to footnote that. I'm going to footnote the word success because it skipped my mind.
Yeah.
Or, I know my sentence is too wordy and I drop it into ChatGPT and I'm like, this is too wordy. Help me cut about 5 or 6 words, and it does.
Yep.
Right.
Gonna footnote that? No. So I don't know
Yeah.
how you would implement that policy.
And that's one of the things I ask too, because I do use it a lot of times just to check myself stylistically. And I don't know how I can do that.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
I think that's the challenge of it. And I think there's good intentions within a policy or a policy discussion on this, especially when it comes to, because basically if I understand correctly, probably the intention behind the policy is to be able to verify the information that's being outputted, right? So verify that the data that it's analyzing, the output is accurate to the best of everyone's understanding. So that can be rather challenging if you're just using it as a content generator, or summarizing things or things like that, or rewriting something, kind of almost like an editor of sorts, like a content editor. That's a very, very different application in my mind than, say, something like analyze this budget and provide a ROI for the next 10 years for a new parks and recreation program. Those are different to me. Those are different applications, but thinking through, okay, and it goes back to Raphael's point about, okay, the models are changing so rapidly that a policy that fits everything is going to be really, really hard. It's almost like trying to nail Jello to a wall at that point. And going back to acceptable use policies and things like that probably is the best bet. Just curious here, how many of y'all have within your organization have an AI policy, or are discussing, maybe it doesn't have to be published yet, or have drafted some kind of AI specific policy? I see some head shaking. So I think some of us are kind of going away from that. And that doesn't, Bill said he does. Yep. Okay. That doesn't surprise me a whole lot, because I think, to Raphael's point, we're probably going to see less and less AI specific policies and more revisions and maybe some amendments to the acceptable use policies, where we basically carve out a paragraph there that applies to AI and have that as a kind of a catch-all for any web-based tool or things like that under the acceptable use policy, and just kind of go from there in terms of policy management of these AI systems, because of how fast and how rapidly it's growing, right? Think about this. You go back to, again, we're discussing this in September of 2024. 2 years ago is when ChatGPT was first launched publicly, and we think through just the massive iterations that ChatGPT alone has done in the last just 2 years, which isn't a whole, like, from a technological standpoint, that's not a long time for these massive increases, right? We went from basically being able to generate written content and summarize written content at a basic, I say basic, but for a large language model, a basic level, to now creating images, creating visualizations of graphs and charts, being able to upload documents, and all kinds of things from just the last 2 years. It's kind of incredible how fast this has progressed, and who knows what could increase in the next 2 years. There's conversations about things like ChatGPT 5 and be able to analyze video content and things like that, which could be quite interesting. So, Natalia, do you want to add anything here? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say at flood control, we do have a policy. We started talking about artificial intelligence maybe like 6 months ago. And I feel like the policy is just kind of like general enough, like make sure that you vet all the information that it's coming out of the generative AI tool, and use your work email account to create, to use generative AI. And we have right now basically a lot of freedom to just experiment with what the tool can do. It's not like officially implemented to any system or any process or anything like that. We're just kind of like exploring what can we do with it and where it can be applied in different departments. And we have kind of like an ongoing conversation in sharing use cases and how people are interacting with it. I feel like there's a big amount of people that are very receptive and very open to it, but also there's a big group of people that are still, as it was mentioned, a little bit hesitant about, like how is this going to, like, is this going to replace our job? Is this going to do, kind of these kind of questions of is this actually good or is this not? So I feel we just need more time kind of like getting used to it and talking about it. And thank you for opening this space to like see where everybody's at. And it's interesting to see how everybody's kind of like at different stages of the process.
Yeah, that's the important piece too, is that everyone's different. Even within a single organization, everyone's at different places too, right? Some departments could be faster than others. Some individuals are going to adopt it faster than others too, which is fine. That's why we want to share how we're learning it. And even if someone's, say, ahead of the adoption curve, there might have been some mistakes that they've made along that adoption curve, where someone who's, near the beginning of that process can actually speak to, okay, hey, there's some mistakes you're making here in this process. If you don't address these mistakes early on, then your curve is actually going to end up off the side of the cliff and not where I actually want to go with it. Curious, Natalia, can you speak to have you seen any cool use cases that have come up within the flood control district? Anything that's exciting that you've seen so far?
So right now, I mostly can speak about my own experience with it. I work in the communications department, so I experiment with a lot of everything that has to do with graphics and written communication. So I'm a graphic designer, and a lot of times I get written content from the project specialists. So I have just a limited amount of space to fit in the content. So, basic things as, make these shorter or condense these, but keep these and these main ideas. Something that saved me a ton of time was I was trying to find a location of some photos, and I didn't have it in the description of the photo. So I just took a screenshot of the GPS coordinates that the photos fortunately had. And then I asked ChatGPT, which is what we're using for the watershed and the crossing streets where the photos were taken, and it was able to give me that information in no time. It would have taken me a day to
Oh, wow.
ask, I don't know, 5 different people about where it was taken specifically, and I maybe could not have found the answer, but I was able to find it that way. And just kind of expediting a lot of like kind of routine processes, like creating social media posts. It's super easy right now with generative AI. Of course, I have to, go back and make sure that it follows the brand standards and, that it looks like aesthetically the way that I want it to, but at least it saves me like half of the time generating just kind of like a basic structure or layout.
Interesting. That's fascinating. That's a really cool example too of the time saved on finding that where that image was taken and things like that. Speaking of images, have you done anything with like image generation for the post at all? Anything with Dolly or Midjourney or things like that at all?
I have, but I feel like because of the work that we do is so technical, I feel like the image generation is still too kind of like fantasy world looking. I don't think it can give me kind of like the accuracy that we need. Like even though we use sometimes illustrations, they're still like very like realistic. And yeah, I haven't had much success using the image generating for that purpose particularly. I did experiment with feeding it different documents and asking it to create different graphics based on the content, and that was good. And also like put in different formats, like a table or a chart and things like that. So that saves a lot of time from kind of like, reading the content and then figuring out, okay, what's the best way to portray this information. I can just tell ChatGPT, okay, here's the content, give me 5 options on how to present this in a way that makes sense graphically.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's the hard part within local government and within the public sector space is we want to be able to have content that's relatable to our community and things like that. And I think of like obviously a lot of applications you could probably come up with if you were a PR firm or a public or private sector entity creating imaging and things like that. But I don't necessarily want to have a Parks and Recreation event that has pictures of fake people on the Park and Recreation event, right? I want the actual people who are actually there and the real smiles of real kids who had fun at that event, not some AI, AI child or something like that, right? I want the real thing. I want the real folks eating the hot dog and having ice cream over their face or something like that, right? Those are the ones that are more relatable as people, and so that's why the image generation is certainly interesting, and it's fascinating how good of a job it's increased in its ability to do. Again, probably last year, if we're being honest with it, less than that in terms of when image generation kind of first launched out. It's been quite impressive. Some of the images I've seen are quite impressive. But having that human connection, I think, is also extremely valuable in our world as we navigate this space. And that's something too to think about is when it comes to use of ChatGPT or generative AI systems, is that human element, right? And so connecting as a human, and going back to their first conversation with Raphael about chatbots or different things like that, joining our meetings or joining different board meetings or team meetings, it's important to have that human to human connection in this world of still cultivating the human to human connection and not just relying on technology, but using technology to augment our ability to save time, like Natalia talked about, to be able to not just save time for the sake of saving time, but save time that where we can interact with our community members, we can do more with our teams and collaborate more, and not having to spend a couple days trying to find where this image is located. We actually can collaborate in things that have more weight and more value to them. So I appreciate everyone joining, sharing their experiences, sharing the different challenges they've done on this too. Would love to hear from you if you have other things that maybe you didn't want to put out there in the open a recorded phone call or something like that, feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and we can chat that way too. I'd love to continue to hear the different challenges that you've faced the last 2 years since ChatGPT launched, and as you roll out generative AI or adopt it and start to use it in your organization. Would love to continue that conversation. And if you want to message me privately, I'll make sure to keep things anonymous too when we can have a conversation about whether or not we want to share that challenge or that use case. And we can obviously edit out your specific name, your specific organization, or things like that. But I think there's a lot of value in sharing where we're all at in the journey and learning from each other, and knowing that the challenges that we face in our organization probably not unique to us, and probably not unique even to our city size, as Denise mentioned, right? The population size has little to nothing to do with AI adoption. It just depends on how much time and resource that the leadership team can devote to a project like this, and where they're at within the Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a city organization. So with that being said, thank you all again for joining us. Appreciate the taking a couple minutes out of your day here to join us today and talk about the challenges of generative AI as we kind of celebrate tongue-in-cheek the 2-year anniversary of probably going to be one of the most consequential inventions of our lifetime with ChatGPT. So with that being said, our next meeting will be on October. Can't believe it's October already. This is crazy. October 7th. So we're excited. I'm going to have someone come in and talk about AI and a different approach they have to the building permit process. So in August, we had a conversation with Archistar and their model for building permits. We're going to have another company come on and talk about it, which is going to be really interesting, because this way you can see kind of 2 different approaches to how they're solving the building permit process. It'd be super exciting to learn different ways and different tools to solve backlogs of building permits and speed up this process, and hopefully address some of the housing crises that we probably all face in different areas here. So join us on October 7th, 11:30 Phoenix time for that meeting. Should be fun. Until next time, thank you all for joining. Be well.